Welcome back to another F1 podcast with Blake Buettner. I'm your host, Wesley Smith, or co-host rather. I want to welcome you to a recap of the F1 movie. This was a super fun conversation. And yes, that's my daughter hiccuping in the background. Welcome back to the show. We'll keep this short. Let's get into it. It's a fun one. Thanks for listening.
Wesley Smith, it's good to see you, man. How you doing this fine Saturday morning?
Likewise, man, I've got coffee in hand. I'm waking up slowly but surely. It's
Right?
we're rocking and rolling. Apologies to everyone listening. This should have come out earlier in the week. I will take full responsibility for the mishap in having to reschedule. Blake, I do apologize for the
No,
18th
no
time.
worries. No worries at all. We
Yeah,
just now we get to do this. We're in Q3 of qualifying right now for the Austrian Grand Prix. And it's Saturday morning. I love it. I am a morning person. Now that you've got your kid, congratulations again, by the way.
oh,
You're gonna
thanks.
become a morning person if you weren't already a morning person.
You know what's funny is like I always I'm not like I've always been a late to bed, early to rise kind of guy, which is probably less than healthy, but it's kind of one of those things where once I get coffee in my system, I'm like, let's go. I mean,
You're ready to roll.
I've joked ad nauseum at this point that like I've flown enough red eyes to prepare me for parenthood,
Sure,
just like
sure,
lack of
yeah.
sleep. So it's one of those things where I hit the ground in New York City. I go straight to, I don't know, Gasoline Alley or just name a coffee shop, Maman or whatever. And I'm
Yeah.
just like pounding the quadruple espressos and then I'm fine. But uh, this morning, no quad shot of espresso, just a stiff cup of coffee.
Just good old fashioned diesel. All right.
Yeah.
All right. Love it. So we are recording this slightly off kind of usual schedule so that we can react to a movie that we both watched this week. We were both invited to screenings by IWC, which is, of course, F1, the movie. And we haven't talked about our thoughts on this movie with each other at all. So
No.
so it will be just a totally fresh kind of reaction to this, and we've both seen it within the past couple of days. Before we get into any of that, we can do a wrist check. Though, Wes, what do you got on today?
Well, it's so early in the day. I haven't put one on yet, but
Uh-oh,
it's
okay.
right behind me where it,
All right.
where whatever watch I'm wearing that day usually resides in my like valet tray, if you will.
Got it.
But it's the tribute to 3705, of course.
Nice. Yes, I love that watch. That's a watch that since the first time I handled it, whenever it came out, whatever year it came, it's been a few years now. It's been like
2021.
stuck in the back of my mind. Like it's such a
Yep.
cool watch. I also really love the titanium version of the pilot's chronograph that they came out with in Miami for the Mercedes team with the Petronas green dial.
Right.
Both of them are like lightweight cases, and that case just like makes so much more sense on the wrist when it's lighter weight, right?
I couldn't agree more. And what's funny is I was listening to Hairspring podcast yesterday while cleaning up a storage room where I keep all my product. Very productive Friday, I might add. And
Nice.
it was it was the 3705 came up in conversation, and I didn't realize like the original had like some trouble with it. Like no one's I've just never heard anybody talk about like that ceramic case. Somebody
Mhm.
said like it was almost kind of brittle, like because ceramic, as you know, Blake, like if you drop it on like the concrete or like a tile floor, like it can shatter, but
Yeah.
it's also super di hard.
Yeah.
So I don't think I'm going to have that issue with the tribute. So that just even further validates why I'd rather have this one than the original.
Yeah, like obviously it's more of like an alloy, right? In the ceratanium, like there's other
Mm,
things kind of mixed in with it, but ceramic on its own, obviously, and that's
yeah,
a material that IWC was on the forefront of using
totally.
back in the 80s. So it's something that
The
they had a
80s,
good,
yeah.
but there's certain qualities of it that there's just kind of like no escaping. And if the technology didn't exist at the time, that's just kind of how it is.
Yeah.
Here's a little known fact about me. I don't know if I've ever said this on the podcast before. I got
Oh,
deep into ceramics and like throwing ceramics in university when I went to
right.
schools. I have a degree in fine arts. I am like 2 credits away from having a fine arts degree in ceramics.
No
And it
way.
was really like a last minute shift over to graphic design. I think it was my dad that said to me, like, well, have you thought about like your career? Like, what are you going to do with like a career out of that? And it
Yeah,
was
go
like
off, Seth Rogen.
it was like, oh, okay. Like, I guess, yeah, like, I was also into the computers and graphics and all that kind of stuff. So it was close enough that I could shift into the graphic design and graduate with, with a major in graphic design. But I loved ceramics. I love throwing my own vessels, plates, vases, coffee cups, all that kind of stuff. Like that was my jam. I loved that. And a part of that was, obviously you're firing the things, you're doing, you're making your own, engobes, glazes, all that kind of stuff. So
Hmm.
you get deep into all of that. Suffice to say, you learn about the brittlety, the like brittle nature of ceramic, like pretty
Yeah.
quick.
Yeah,
Doing.
it's interesting because like I've outside of watches and my interest in cars and such, like I'm a freak about bowls. Like I collect sculpture, bowls, anything that just like again to use your word vessel.
Yeah.
Like I've got collaboration stuff. I've got real horn. Like I've got a bowl I got in Europe when I in
Like turned.
2002.
Yeah.
No, it's like real horn, like a horn button you'd find on a jacket, but it's a
Oh, sure.
bowl.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay.
It's
Okay.
crazy. It's like kind of square. This is great audio content, mind you.
Look,
Uh,
this can be your preview. Maybe we can have like a collab in your shop with just a ceramic section and a vessel section.
dude, I actually, so I've had a bowl concept in mind, um, for probably 5 years at this point.
Okay.
The, okay, how do I say this without spoiling it? Which, oh, by the way, speaking of spoilers, we can't spoil the movie, in our chat.
Yeah,
Like this
maybe
is going
we'll
to be
get
a tap
into
dance.
maybe like at the end, maybe in like the final like 10 minutes we can get into like spoilery talk.
Specifics.
But
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
we'll
yeah.
give it a fair warning for anyone listening that
Sure.
like, hey, we're about to get
Okay.
into spoilery stuff.
Yeah, yeah.
Not that there's any like major twist or like I don't think there's anything that's happening in this movie that if you've seen the previews, you probably aren't already imagining.
Right. Yeah, yeah, totally. But yeah, this bowl concept I've had for like 5 years, but really it's automotive inspired, I will say, which is not intuitive, I think, for those listening probably. You don't think of a bowl being inside of a car, of course, but
Yeah,
but it is automotive inspired. It's a very outside of the box way of thinking, and I think it's just really the sampling and the manufacturing that are really, really setting me back.
sure.
Offline, I'll tell you what it is, Blake, just to keep
Okay.
people
All right.
agitated.
So, but we'll throw that carrot out there. Maybe we can work something out in the future if I can figure out a way to make this thing.
Yeah.
At least a few of them. I love it. Well, we'll finish off our wrist check here. I'm wearing an Ingenieur with the teal dial,
So good.
which is what I wore to the movie, and in which features relatively prominently in this movie. We could start out and say like
100%.
this is pretty good watch spotting in this movie, as you might
Yeah.
imagine, with IWC being a partner, sponsor, I don't know, whatever you want to call them.
Yeah.
There's a lot of IWC watch spotting in this
Yes.
movie. And there's even a kind of a funny other moment because it opens with the Daytona race. It's 24 hour, which I will just go ahead and say is maybe some of my favorite racing scenes in the movie was the Daytona section. I thought it was a great like celebration of Daytona, of sports car racing.
And so what a delightful surprise to see Patrick Long get out of the car too. I don't know if you know who that is, but he races. He's the only American factory driver ever to drive for Porsche, I believe. And he's the guy that heads up Lufka, which is the huge Porsche meetups. I've had a booth there at some of theirs. The one this October's in Durham, North Carolina. Shout out the Lufka crew because it's
Right.
an event unlike any other. And I've met Patrick, of course, a couple times, and he's the nicest guy. And I had no idea he was in the movie. And I'm like sitting in the theater. I was like, dude, that's Patrick Long.
Yeah, that's another thing. If you have a keen eye, there is some people that show up
Easter
in this
eggs.
movie
Yeah.
that that maybe aren't called out as such,
Right.
but are there. But the only other reference to a different watch in this movie is
Yeah.
after he's like leaving the track and the guy comes
Yes.
out with the green box and he says, "Well, what do you want me to do with this?" And Brad Pitt's character says, "Or do you want to watch or something?" He's like, "I already got one."
Yeah.
They don't like show close up or anything of the, but they do show plenty of shots of him wearing this watch. He
Yeah.
seems like a very like ritual driven kind of guy, right?
Yes.
This Sonny Hayes character, and the watch just seems like a part of that, and like
Yeah.
where he puts it going into the race and all that kind of stuff. So, anyways, you see this watch a lot, and it is the old school 1832 Ingenieur with a
So
green
good.
dial. It's a custom situation though, because the people at IWC told me, maybe you heard this as well, that they had to thin
Yeah.
out the case. Like he asked for it. He
The
thought it was
movement.
too
Yeah, he wanted it
thick.
thinner. Well,
He wanted
because
it
you got to
thinner. Yeah.
think in real life, he's, a Vacheron guy, a 222 guy, and like I think that had a lot to do with it. Like
Yeah.
the lineage is, not too dissimilar, you know what I mean? So
Sure. Yeah.
like it's a integrated bracelet watch, and of course, I think that's kind of coming from the 222 over to the Ingenieur. You're like, I would really like this thinner,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah, of course. Like these are upper echelon brands, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And it's the same with the Nautilus. It's the same with Royal Oak that was a few years before. All of
Yeah.
those watches are very svelte
Yep.
watches, and they wear just like absolute silk on the wrist.
Yep.
And as good as the SL is, the Ingenieur, like it's not quite in that same vein. I think that
Right.
also has something to do with how the end link of the case meets up with the bracelet. It's that stiff, so
Hmm.
at any rate, that's the watch though that Brad Pitt wears, and he asked for it to be a little thinner. So they made a modification to the case back, I believe. It put a new case back on it to make it to shave like a millimeter off of it or something like that. So it's a
Yeah.
one-off, ostensibly a one-off watch that they
Right.
created for
Yeah.
Brad Pitt and this movie.
And a really cool shade of green. It's unlike any other green you've ever seen. It's really like kind of matte and vintage, dare I say. Like, I
Yeah.
mean, if that's a horrible descriptor, but like it does look almost kind of patinaed in a color sense.
Yeah, it's great looking green,
Yeah.
and it's something that they tried to capture, although not quite in the same way on the modern Ingenieur, of course,
Hmm.
with
Hmm.
a newer release with the green dial, which has like the gilt accents, right? So it kind of gives off
Yep.
that same vibe. But the dial of the modern Ingenieur with that like kind of checkerboard basket
Yeah.
weave type
Yeah.
situation, it can get a little, you know, there's no mistaking it for like a throwback vibe,
Yeah.
right? I'll just say
Totally.
that. Like it's got some
Yeah.
flash to it. It's very dynamic, so the green can really like shift into different areas quite a bit. Have you seen some of these in person? Like, what do you think of that dial, that green dial?
Yeah, I've seen them all. When I was at Goodwood, the guy riding in the van with me to get to the venue had the first one delivered in the UK on his wrist. So I've like held it, spent some time with it, held it, natural light in the van, that kind of thing. And
Yeah,
just
yeah,
to your point, I think like many of the Ingenieurs, like yours included, actually, there's the color changes depending on the light and the angle
yeah.
and I think that's also a testament to the texture of the dial as well, not just the color. So it really is dynamic, I'll say.
Yeah, yeah, it sure is, and it might even be like annoying if you like the color in some light, but then you don't like it in like a different different
That's a
light.
fair point, actually.
Because
Yeah.
it's really like all over the map, and there are some angles and some lights that I see mine in that I'm kind of like less a fan of the teal, but then
Oh,
others that
that's
like I really
funny.
love it, and that's just kind of like how it goes, how it goes with it.
That's really interesting. Yeah, but the green one, for whatever reason, that's the only color variant. They did the dial furniture surrounded in gilt, like the gold, yellow
Yeah,
gold
yeah,
looking color. Which I'm not a yellow gold guy, so that was my only turnoff of the green. And plus, I'm not much of a green guy either. I'm very much on I skew blue more than
yeah,
green
yeah.
personally, or just black and gray, which is why the titanium is like
The titanium is so good.
that's
Yeah.
the one for me, I think, outside of maybe the rose gold black dial, which historically I have really loved that variant of the Royal Oak, the rose gold black dial Royal Oak from
Hmm.
I don't even know what year that was, years ago. Um, but I just due to the brands themselves, I think I would go on Janor now, even over the Royal Oak, which may be a hot take.
Oh, okay. That's definitely That's definitely a hot take.
And it's
Uh,
it's more of a birds of a feather thing, if you catch my drift.
Sure. No, I get it. I get it. You and I are like longtime fans kind of
Yeah,
IWC, and we both had old and new IWC watches. So it's
yeah.
that checks out, and we're not very like flashy guys, I would
Well,
say.
some of
So
the Royal Oak wearers, I'll just call a spade a spade. They're just not my cup of tea from a
sure.
personality standpoint.
Sure. All right. You're on a roll this morning, dude.
Dude, I got
That
coffee in my
coffee's kicking.
veins.
That coffee's kicking in.
This dirty water is really good.
Royal Oak owners among our listeners can send their angry mail over to the standard age on that one.
I mean, I really do love that watch. The Royal Oak is incredible. I mean,
Yep,
I will give it that, but unfortunately, some of their patrons are just not my people.
sure. Did you the screening that you went to? Did they
Hmm.
play like a vignette with Gerald Genta and like
Yes.
a young girl,
Yep.
and they watched her father? I thought that was really lovely.
It
Uh,
was really, really well done. And I feel like when they launched the Ingenieur, wasn't there like a microcosm of that?
There a little bit, and it pulled on some of those threads, but
Okay, see,
but this was like they
it was
incorporated
like
the
a
whole kind
short
of.
film. Yeah,
Yes, it was lovely. I don't know where else. Maybe it's on their YouTube channel. If I can find it out there, if we can find it,
gotta link it.
we'll leave links to that
Yeah,
down below. I
it's
thought
very nice.
it was very nice, and it was a nice like lead in to the story because like they don't there's a lot of like background trauma that Sonny Hayes experiences, but they don't really get into like the details of like his relationship with his father or anything like that.
Hmm.
But he's got this picture of his father of in him as a kid that's like that he has wherever they're racing, and that's what he puts his watch in front of before he goes into the race. This is kind of like a theme throughout the film. And then he's
Hmm.
got his deck of cards and he puts one again back to the like rituals that this guy gets
Ritualistic. Yeah.
gets into. And of course like the watch and the father also, but they don't really get into like what that was. You learn in the movie that he died when he was a teenager,
Right.
and but there's nothing else that they really get into. That little short film, almost had more of like a sentimental, like emotional element to it
Totally.
than they approach in the whole movie.
Well, and also just like the sentimental approach to the creation of the watch, I think,
Yeah,
like just how they were just mad shit talking about this watch,
yeah, yeah,
from a design standpoint and him being an artist,
yeah. Which is cool, which is its own thing, and
Yeah.
it's the one thing that I've talked about with the Ingenieur. I'm sure you have as well, compared
Hmm.
to like the Nautilus and the Royal Oak, uh, and even the Overseas to some extent. But like those other
Hmm.
two have kind of been consistent and have consistently stayed the same.
Yeah.
When Genta did this Ingenieur, the Ingenieur was already almost 20 years old, and it had already an existing kind of design language and meaning and all that kind of stuff. And in the time since the Genta design, it has also experienced a lot of other design iterations, right? So it's
Hmm.
never really kind of had this consistent thread of an
Right.
identity, which is probably to its detriment when you talk about it compared to the Royal Oaks of the world and the Nautilus
Yeah.
of the world, because
Yeah.
those like people have known what they are. It's a consistent through line that they've had since the 70s. The Ingenieur doesn't really have that. So I think, this with this new one, they're trying to kind of reestablish that.
Yeah, I think it's almost like the Ingenieur line as opposed to the Ingenieur watch. Does that make
Yeah.
sense?
Yeah.
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 Like
Like
it's
it's,
it's been an evolution kind of thing.
yeah. Yeah. I don't know what got us on this, on this in this track because we're talking about the movie and all that kind of stuff.
The watch on your wrist got us onto this.
Oh, that's right. Well, but this is the subject of that film, and
Yeah.
you had mentioned it gets a lot of flack, right, in that short film,
Yes.
and that
Yeah.
it kind of, that design, that Genta design, didn't stick around for all that long, and then
Yeah.
they came back to it in like the early 2000s and 2010s.
Hmm.
2013, I think, was the most recent other version, and then of course the one that we got a couple years ago.
Yeah.
So anyways, we'll try and find this movie and link it down below. It's a great short film. So back to the F1 though movie. Um, I'll just like jump right in and say that I enjoyed it, not as much as like Top Gun, and I would love to have the perception of the movie as someone that doesn't closely follow F1 as a sport and that's not really into F1. I think what that you maybe take something away from this that's very different than, when I look at it, there's a lot of kind of eye-rolling movement moments and suspension of
It's
belief, all
really
that kind
funny
of
you should
stuff.
say that. Yeah.
So it's a
I
weird
could.
experience to judge, right?
Well, it is, and I think I left the theater basically. So there were two for those listening. So basically, there were two screenings, not quite back to back. They sort of were the bookends of a cocktail party. So I was at the earlier screening at 2:30, 3 o'clock, whatever it was. Then there was a cocktail hour or like a party, and then they did a screening after.
Yeah.
Um, I wonder how the movie is after drinking, mind you. But anyway,
Can't be
um,
worse.
you're right. I mean, the in-car footage though may,
Yeah, yeah,
is
yeah.
that drunk driving? I don't know.
Yeah, exactly.
But the thing is, there's a couple things. When I went to the cocktail party, it, it was very like present watching this movie with how much exposition there was with regards to I remember this distinctly. Somebody, like one of the announcers in the race, was saying something about the DRS, and then the very next announcer was like, "Yes, the drag reduction system." So
Yeah.
there's very much like this. Hey, oh, by the way, in case you don't know, DRS stands for,
Yeah,
So
yeah.
which I think is completely targeted at those who don't follow F1, right? And even drag reduction system is sort of well, what is that? Like if you're not a car person or a racing fan for sure, like even that could be lost on some people, I guess.
Yeah, they do get into not too deep into the weeds of some of the technical components, but they do like there's a lot of talk about the tires and strategy and like the aerodynamics of the cars and how it's hard for them to race kind of side by side. All like very accurate stuff. And I think, in general, it is like a kind of a fair representation
Yeah, I
of
think
the
they did
sport.
that really well.
Yeah, absolutely. I do. One of the things that I didn't really care for Martin Brundle and Crofty, like there's a lot of exposition from them, just kind of like
That's what I
narrating
mean.
the races,
Yes.
and it's a lot of like kind of handholdy stuff that maybe I didn't really need. And it's really kind of comes down to these personal moments in the races. All the other drivers and team principals, all that kind of stuff, like they're in the movie, but they're not really acknowledged. Like there's no like, here's the standings for the driver championship, and here's the standings for or here's who won that race, or they don't get into any of that kind of stuff. Or
Right,
like, here's where we
right.
are in the season, and here's it's really not about any of that. It is like a personal journey with this team and with
Well,
the people on this team.
and the team, it's like they're just trying to score a point. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
it's so who cares about driver standings when you're like, I'm just trying to get into 10th place.
Yeah, and I like that that it is kind of like this intimate
Same.
look inside the team.
Yeah.
One of the things that I didn't care for is they really kind of to get to these points wander into some morally gray areas that would be like heavily frowned upon if actually, where they are deliberately causing accidents and yellow flags and stuff like this to kind of play the game. But at the same time, especially after like Monaco and some of the races, you're like, it historically it has happened.
Yeah. Well, and
This,
also that is a testament to Sonny Hayes's character, right? Like, I
yeah,
mean, it's if you're a gambler, sometimes you got to do what you got to do to win. You know what I
yeah,
mean?
yeah, yeah, yeah. His character is kind of like I don't know, like it hits a lot of the stereotypes of who I think like how Brad Pitt maybe envisions himself in real life. This kind of like no BS, straight shooter kind of guy. How he dresses, like it just kind of in my mind kind of feels like this is the guy that he thinks he is in like just everyday life in
That's
LA.
hilarious.
Um, one of the things, the criticisms that I have of the movie is like the script and the story, like it's, I think is maybe one of the weak points, and I don't really feel like a connection to either of the two of them in like a deep way because
Mm,
they both kind of come off like assholes a lot of the time. And there's not enough like anchor in like who they are underneath that for me to feel like I care
right. Interesting. Yeah.
about them. And that kind of like leads into where the end of the movie, which we'll get into later, I'm kind of like, it's not like a pulling one way or another or something like that,
Yeah.
But like like, and there is a lot of exposition. It's a lot of it's actually not as much kind of on track action as I
Hmm.
thought there might be.
Yeah, interesting. I think one of the other interesting parts, which I don't think would ever exist in reality, and correct me if I'm wrong, but like the drivers in a race literally talking to each other over the radio,
Yeah,
which like I don't think that ever happens. Like
it doesn't happen,
the
and
whole
they
like quote, follow my lead, so to speak. Like
so
I
I
don't think that is even possible, is it?
no, I think they imply that they're talking to their race engineers, and then the race
Okay.
engineers
Okay.
are conveying the information. But obviously, this is all happening like in real time reaction
Sure.
type
Yeah,
stuff.
yeah, yeah,
And
yeah.
when you're watching the race on F1 TV or whatever, it's not like we hear even a small fraction of all of the radio
No.
comms. Like there's a lot more going on there. So like yeah, I wonder how much like communications there are to like, hey,
Yeah.
tell the other driver this or tell him that or I'm going to try and do it. Like how much they engage with or try to engage with each other on strategy, or if they are
Yeah.
just kind of like in their own bubbles running their own races with the race
Yeah.
engineers, and that's that. I have no idea, honestly.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. The follow my lead thing, I was like, oh wow, well that is definitely just directly plucked from Top Gun. You know what I mean? Like it just felt
Yeah,
like,
yeah, yeah,
hey, wingman, so to speak,
yeah. It-
which is fine. Like I'm not trying to trash the movie, of course, but I thought it was extremely entertaining. I thought it was really, really fun.
yeah,
And again, I think I was really trying to watch it less as an F1 fan and more as and I'm not even a movie guy, I wouldn't say. I mean, you'd be shocked at the movies I have not seen in my life, as far as classics and stuff go.
okay,
Um, but like I was also kind of viewing it through the lens of like, what would my wife think of this movie kind of thing, who does not give a rip about F1, you know?
yeah, yeah,
It's one of those things. And I think due to the exposition, due to the script, maybe lacking depth, maybe not,
yeah,
whatever. I think generally speaking, it's a huge movie, obviously,
yeah,
highly, highly promoted. My biggest concern going into it, frankly, was like this is going to be completely overrated or like because I don't know about your algorithm on your Instagram, but I have been getting F1, F1, F1 the movie just in
yeah.
my
They,
wife even said something. Like I was on YouTube the other day. Like we'll occasionally watch YouTube like while we eat lunch,
yeah,
like Hot Ones episodes, for
of course, yeah,
example.
yeah, yeah,
And so but the homepage will like show F1 the movie, this interview with Brad Pitt, this interview with
yeah.
Idris, and it's just like she said just yesterday, she goes, "Can you stop with this movie?" And I was like, "It's the algorithm. It's not me." Like,
But you like look, you and frankly me, we're like the exact target demographic that
100%.
that they're trying to reach, and obviously
Yeah,
they have like they put some major resources behind
totally.
advertising this movie. They maybe overdid it, maybe overcooked that a little bit. I think, um, and it reminds me, I was at an event with IWC. It was down in Miami, and one of their collectors guys who is a trainer, is a Top Gun pilot that
Oh,
I
no
got
kidding.
to chat with, and we hung out for a while. Great guy. And I asked him about the Top Gun's movies. And he had this kind of like probably the same reaction that I just did with the if you're into F1. He's kind of
Okay.
like, yeah, yeah, they took a lot of liberties, and no, that's not how all that works. But at the end of the day, he really enjoyed the movie.
Right.
Just if you take it kind of for what it is, right? A piece of
Right.
Hollywood, like a piece of entertainment. So you know, almost nobody knows how Top Gun works, just normal people. It's not
Sure.
like a sport that we can follow, right?
Yeah,
Like
yeah,
F1,
yeah.
lots of
That's
people
true.
watch it. So it's
There's no
easier
Top
to,
Gun channel.
yeah, exactly. Like it's easier to judge, I think, the F1 movie because it is so accessible
Yeah.
to all of us to watch. So it's easier for us to nitpick and all that kind of stuff. Whereas like Top Gun, I'm sure it's the same, but none of us know anything about Top Gun or like flying
Right.
fighter jets. So it's all like awesome, you know?
The worst part about Maverick for me was the mission itself. Like it was such a lame mission.
Kind of like a video game style
It was
mission.
yeah, it was like worse than Mission Impossible or like I don't know, it just seems such like a janky mission that they had to do. But like the story and the movie and the cinematography and the love story, like
Yeah.
everything else was awesome, like the
Yeah.
interpersonal conflicts and stuff like that. Like that was great. But
Yeah,
like the
probably even
mission
stronger
itself
than
was so
F1.
lame.
Yeah, 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 I agree. But that almost seems like secondary, right?
It is
It's like don't worry
because it
about that,
sucked.
right? It's like,
Like,
here's like the MacGuffin of the plot or whatever. Like
sure.
it
Yeah.
doesn't really matter what it is because like all
Yeah.
the other stuff around it.
Yeah.
Like and that's like all of the Mission Impossible names, right? Back to the first one, like the knock list, the list of name. That's like it's less important, but it's like the driver of all these plot elements.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it has to be so it has to be there. uh so I want to talk about like some of the historic, like they mesh this movie with like
Mhm.
real life, and I think that's why we don't see a ton of on-track action, because like they had to like digitally stitch the cars into the middle of the racing action a lot of times, right?
Mhm.
Outside of just like the starting sequence, or where it's just like them in one other car that they maybe filmed, I don't know, on private track days or something like that. But there are
Yeah.
actual moments in actual races that happens that you see that
Yeah.
you're like, oh, I remember that happened, right?
Yeah,
Or
that when the was it Max or Sergio went off track, I think in Mexico, I think,
yep,
right? The
all
first
this
turn.
stuff, yeah, it's all real life. It all happened in real life. So it's I can imagine how hard it is to put the cars digitally into like an actual racing scene, and it mostly works. There's some parts where the proportions and stuff doesn't quite all
Right.
add up, I think, but it's cool to see, and I think the what you're into it for is the kind of like the cockpit views, the cameras that will like swing around, like that's
Yep.
like pretty cool stuff.
Very cool.
I think, and as I mentioned, it is kind of blended in with real life. Even the crash that he had in the movie, I think they say it was '93, where his car split and he's
The
like
camel
sat on
car.
the track.
Hmm.
Yeah, that actually is based on a real event. Martin Donnelly. It actually happened in 1991, though. That was Eddie Jordan's
Yep.
team, I believe. And yeah,
Was that the real footage? Because like the way the body was contorted on the track looked
it's
exactly
it's
like
it's
the
exactly
footage.
like Donnelly. I think they just recreated it
Did they?
to a T.
Wow,
Yeah.
because I was thinking actually in the movie, I was like, is this the actual movie? Like, or the actual footage? Because I was like, I started to put myself in the bodies of like the family members who might be watching this movie. And I was like, dude, like
Yeah,
this is kind of crazy.
and well, I'll just say right now, Donnelly did live. He survived, but he never raced F1 again after that.
Right.
And he had a pretty again, like the movie, there was a pretty promising career there. I think Jean Alesi was his teammate, but absolutely like looks horrific to
Right.
see this guy like still strapped to his seat, twisted body, like just sat there. Like that
Yeah.
is based on a real event, and I thought that was
Yep.
kind of an interesting way to play it and kind of like intertwine that part
Hmm.
with reality. Um, do you buy the whole like old man coming into the team is able to perform at the level? Like, here's the thing I want to say before you give your reaction. They show that Brad Pitt is competent at Sonny Hayes. Is like a competent like driven race car driver, but it's not like he's setting fast lap times or like up there racing. They don't imply that he's like the fastest driver out there, that he's just like
Right.
kind of a scruffy opportunistic driver, right?
Right.
So I don't know, but and maybe that plays into
Yeah.
his age thing, but what did you think? Like, okay, he turned 60 during production. They don't really say, they never reference how old he actually is in the movie. So
I was guessing he was like 50 or like, you know what I
yeah,
mean,
I
in the
think that
movie.
makes that's reasonable to assume. But they do say, it was 93. He was a young kid. So I don't know. Like they say like 30 years ago that he was
Right.
driving. And
That's why I was guessing
if
like
he's
50,
20,
yeah.
18, whatever, then yeah, 50, that checks out. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, look, I mean, his neck exercises when he was leaned against the bed, I mean, like he clearly had the neck for it, right? So
Yeah,
like
yeah.
it's one of those things where it was fine. I mean, I think I was all right. And especially, with the Daytona footage, which by the way, I kind of want to take a like an off ramp here just for 2 seconds because we still haven't talked about Le Mans, but the actual race, I mean, not the movie.
Yes, yes.
Because that was what, 2 weeks ago, I think, or
Yeah,
three.
it was
Yeah.
2 weeks ago. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
We don't have to really go into it because for time and
Th-
brevity, but
that's a whole other podcast, but it's worth
yeah.
noting, right? And actually, in next week, 2 weeks, there's the Le Mans Classics that happens, which has historic Le Mans race cars racing for 24 hours on the track, which is also a very cool event. We'll leave links to all this stuff down below, but
I wonder which race is more expensive to put on from like a team standpoint. I
that's a
would
good
imagine the
question.
classics because those are all old parts, right?
And there are like 700 of them that come and participate.
I mean, if you got to think about it, I mean, those cars, because didn't Jerry Seinfeld just like auction off his old car?
Did he? I don't keep up with
The
with him as
917,
much. Did
or
he?
I think it was anyway, I might be off in saying that, but it was like $25 million car or something, or $20
Oh.
million car. So my point is like, is a modern day like LMP car not $20 million? It's probably like 2 to 5, I would guess.
Yeah, I mean, especially if you like amortize the costs of the research and
Right.
development over the number of chassis that they make and all that
Yeah.
kind of stuff. I'm sure it evens out to,
Yeah. I
you
mean,
know.
it was just a funny thought that like
Yeah.
the historic race might be like 100 times more expensive than
Yeah,
it might be.
yeah, exactly. Yeah. I'm sure it is. Yeah.
Yeah.
But it was, yeah, Le Mans was a good race. The Daytona is also an awesome race. Like IMSA sports car racing is a lot of fun to watch.
Yeah.
And as I mentioned, I think the opening part of the movie is a very effective way to sell that. Like
Yeah.
it was awesome. I enjoyed that part
We got a lot of Earnhardt rubbing his racing kind of vibes in the opening sequence. Loved, loved, loved that.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
And that's the most raw, I think. And like even when you're like watching modern day Le Mans racing, and some of those like GT3 races, I mean, those things. And here's what I love, as you said, it's a different podcast, and I agree. Like it could be, but what I love is that you can bump cars and you don't automatically get a flat. Whereas like an F1, if you touch a tire, it's shredded. You know what I mean?
yeah. Open wheel racing is a slightly different. Like
Yeah.
it's maybe it won't be a big deal, but it might also completely destroy your car. Like
Yeah,
it would
yeah,
be
and that's
somewhere in
why I
between.
like that gamble. Like the
Yeah,
dichotomy of the rubbing is racing amongst the two formats
yeah,
is really interesting.
yeah. Should we get into some spoilery talk, or
Yeah,
do you have
I think
anything else that
so.
you want to
Well,
say
well,
about?
here's what I'll say about the ending
Okay,
is I was actually surprised by the
okay,
ending.
okay.
And I liked the ending. I'll say.
All right. Yeah, I didn't mind it. I was at that race actually in Abu Dhabi, that they filmed at least portions of it. I
Oh, no
wasn't
way.
sure when they filmed it, but they show, um gosh, maybe the Alpha Tauri car is what it was. It had this very special specific livery with these kind of like horizontal lines kind of streaking across the car. It was black and white, and I have pictures of
Okay.
the car from that race. I'll put one in. I'll put a link to one down below so you can see it. And then I was like,
Cool.
oh, I remember that car. I was at that race. I was standing on
Yeah.
that hill as they go. I
Oh,
told that
that's
to my son.
amazing.
He's like, "You're in the movie?" I said, "Yeah, that's right. I'm in the movie."
Yeah. An
It's
unpaid extra.
yeah, unpaid extra. Where's my yeah? No, but this is the penultimate point of the movie. Like it ends here, which is where the season actually ends.
Right.
And again, they're going into this race. It's not to win the championship or to win the driver's championship. It's none of that. It's really
Right.
just to kind of like save this team's
Yeah.
from new ownership and the kind of the only antagonist kind of in the movie, from him being able to, get the money play that he wants and all that kind of
Which I
stuff. Right.
never saw coming when he was introduced. Like I was like,
Yeah,
wait, this
yeah.
guy's the bad guy.
Yeah. But when they show him towards the end of the movie,
Yeah.
that's when we also get another special appearance by our friend Mr. Chris Granger,
Yeah.
who is
Yeah,
up
yeah.
there in the booth a few times with his nice double-breasted suit or
Right.
whatever it is. I was in the theater. I turned to the guy. I was like, "Hey, that's the guy from the thing."
Yeah. It's
Uh,
the guy
so,
from the thing.
so yeah.
What's funny is like the other thought I had watching the movie, and this is maybe less of a spoiler, but sorry guys. Lewis Hamilton obviously being in Abu Dhabi. I was
Yes.
just wondering, were there any triggers for him in the
This
filming of this
this is
movie?
this is the spoiler part that I wanted to kind of get into. So okay, fair warning, from here on out, there's going to be some spoiler stuff. So if you haven't seen the movie yet and you want to watch it,
Yeah, turn this
pause
off.
here and then you can come back to it. Um, but again, it's not like some oh my God, I didn't see that coming twist. It's like, but yes, okay. So there's a familiar scene that unfolds with the race going into well, it goes into a red flag in the movie, right, with 3 laps left. So it allows
Mhm.
everyone to come in, get their fresh tires on, then it goes to a fresh start. Uh, and there is definitely some shades of how all this happens to
Mhm.
2021, the final race of the season, where Lewis Hamilton is leading. That race did not go into a red flag. If it did, he would have won the race, right? Because he
Right.
would have. So that Nicholas Latifi crashed with a handful of laps left, and Lewis was in the lead. Verstappen comes in and takes fresh tires because he had the gap to the person behind him, comes out and ends up overtaking Hamilton to win the race and his first drivers' championship, of course. Very dramatic. They sacked the race director, or the head of the
So
Michael.
spoilers if you haven't seen the
Yeah,
2021
spoilers for the 2021 season. Yeah, yeah. Michael Massey no longer with. This was a very controversial call because it wasn't done.
Nike.
Mikey,
Uh,
no, yes. So this was not exactly done by the book,
right,
right?
right.
So they only let we don't have to get into adjudicating how all that
Sure, sure,
happened.
sure, sure.
Anyways, that's how that went down, and it's a slightly similar scene that takes place here at the end of the movie, at the same track, of course. So, and it's it's Sonny Hayes that actually gets in the wreck,
Right.
right? And because it's red flagged, he's able to bring his car back. They're able to refix it in the 10-minute window. They get back out there. There's a scene here, though, when they're all getting back into their cars where they show Lewis. Like, it's the only part of the movie that we see him or any other driver like acknowledge one of the two fictional drivers.
Right.
And they show Lewis like look at him with a pretty hard look.
Yeah.
And I like that part. And like, let's go, because and then it's the three of them kind of like
Yeah.
duking it out towards the end, and
Yeah.
who's gonna win, which one is gonna, and then all that kind of like ensues. So, uh, did you think that the two that they were gonna crash out and Brad Pitt was gonna get the win? Did you think that
So two
Idris
things.
was gonna get the win? What'd you
Yeah,
think?
I thought Josh would have won, right? So like that was point
Joshua Pierce,
one.
JP.
Yeah, JP, of course. Yeah, yeah. We're
We're
first name
cool.
basis here.
Yeah.
Yeah. Um, yeah, so I thought that would have been the ending. So when that didn't happen, I was like, "Oh, okay." I mean, that's
Yeah.
cool.
Yeah.
Um, so I mean, granted, I guess you could say, Brad's number one on the call sheet, so he's probably going to win this race, But I really did think it was about him maybe taking a seat, and really showing
Look,
because I mean, the whole movie, he's trying to get this
yeah,
guy,
up to that point, right?
you know,
Yes, that's the theme. Him trying to help Joshua Pierce
right.
like have success, so that he can secure a seat for his future. Because
Which is
Brad Pitt
funny
knows
because
he
like
doesn't
when
have a future in it.
well, but it's also interesting because now that you think about it, it's like when Javier Bardem's character, I can't remember his name, not a first name basis with him. Uh, he's when he invites Brad to join the team, so to speak, Sonny, it's like the goal wasn't I need you to help my young driver. The goal was I need to save my team, right?
Yeah,
So
yeah,
that's where the character development is interesting because to your earlier point, they are both kind of assholes, right?
yeah,
So it's not only about them getting along, but it's also like you do see sort of Brad start to take a back seat to and to develop the younger guy, which
yeah.
again, you may or may not have seen coming. I don't know, rather than but the teamwork ensues, so to speak. And that's kind of interesting.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. That is an interesting theme, right? That they kind of pull out there, and that's why I think it would have been, and that they imply that they kind of like research each other a little bit and are come around to each other slowly.
Yeah.
It just doesn't like mature in the way that I would have like wanted it to. Um,
The mom character, JP's mom,
and
like
that
she's
that was,
great.
I liked her. That was maybe like my favorite acting performance of the movie. Her and Javier Bardem. Um, but that was a whole kind of like strange. It felt a little forced, and I will say that what caused that, the accident in Monza, was like cartoonishly ridiculous, right? And they there's an element of like let me just step back and say there are plenty of like real wrecks that have happened in F1 that are like
Yeah.
equally as dramatic. So I
Right.
like, why do you have to take it to like he hits a curb and like launches 20 feet in the air? You don't have to do that to make like a realistic dramatic crash.
But the
Like,
six barrel rolls looked really good on camera.
oh my gosh. Like, look, it reminded me of that part in Meet Joe Black when he gets like hit by the
Oh, when he
cars
gets
like
hit
over
by
and
the
over.
bus?
I'm like, okay, like you could have done that in like a way less dramatic way.
Deep cut Brad Pitt film,
Like
by
it
the
just
way.
doesn't like it didn't have to go that hard.
Right.
Like everyone in the theater was kind of like, oh my God. Like it was almost like embarrassing watching it. And
He
again,
did.
and like there's all these other like crashes that they could have referenced to. And like I would say all the other crashes are like relatively believable and like things like that
Yeah.
have happened. And the car's on fire in his hands. It's very like Romain Grosjean-esque.
I was gonna say they could have just done
They
like a
could have just done
Grosjean. Yeah,
exactly that
yeah,
and like had the
yeah.
car.
Have
But
the car
like
split, blah blah blah.
like using that as the excuse to why she was mad at Sonny's felt like a little strange. Because like obviously wasn't trying to do that to him, and he's
Yeah.
the one that told him. I know that all like gets straightened out later
But
in the movie, but
it gave JP the opportunity to explain to his mom that like you don't
he's not
actually
so
know
bad.
what's going on. Like
But look,
it's
they
not
were
his
like they
fault.
wrecked each other out
Right.
before this. Like if I'm the mom, that's what I'm pissed about.
Yeah, of course.
More
Yeah.
than like something that he obviously didn't mean to happen. And
Yeah.
then Brad Pitt could have shown like through the movie that like, hey, he's actually like a good guy looking out for this kid. And that's what brings the mom around eventually. I thought would have been a
Hmm.
more like
Right.
organic resolution to their relationship rather than, oh, he actually didn't mean to get me in this crash. Like, of course not. Like, come
And
on.
then they get married, and then it's a whole
Yeah,
other
like come
movie, you know?
on. Yeah, I think they could have taken a slightly more realistic approach to that. But this is me being like really like nitpicky, I guess. But these are the kinds of things that kind of like take me out of caring
Yeah.
about some of these characters just because it's
Well,
like,
that's because you care about the real thing so much. You know what I mean?
yes,
So it's
exactly.
like, again, like we need to go back to the beginning of this conversation of like, we are the target demo and we're also not the target demo for this movie, right?
Yeah,
Like
yeah,
I think it
yeah.
is for the layperson and rightfully so, right? Because that's
Yes.
Hollywood needs to make money, right?
And at
So,
the end of the day, that's what I hope for. Like I hope,
yeah,
you know, I hope viewing records are broken for the Austrian GP this weekend. And because everyone saw
totally.
this movie and we're like, I'll give that a try and like tunes in. Therefore, I hope it's an exciting race, not
Yeah,
like a bore fest.
yeah.
By the way, Lando, Leclerc, and Oscar are top three in qualifying. So that's going to be the top three in the grid. I think Lewis is fourth.
Okay. Oh, you saw the results
This
just now
this
while
like
we're recording?
ended as we were like in the beginning of the recording, but then I
Okay,
wanted
because
to
I haven't seen anything yet because it's too early.
well,
I just
oh, spoiler alert then.
no, I don't
But
care. No, that's fine. I mean, that's qualifying, not the race. You know what I mean? So,
yeah, yeah. Well, sometimes
and this
sometimes
is Austrian. Yeah, Austria is an interesting race because is it turn one or two where you typically go off track almost?
well, turn two is it's a big uphill rise, and then
Yeah,
it's a
I think it's
very
that one.
tight
Yeah,
turn. Uh,
there's always incidents
Technically,
going
it's
on
like
there.
turn three, unless they erase, because turn two is that like very slight turn up the
Mm.
hill
Yeah,
towards the
yeah, yeah,
turn.
yeah.
But turn one is also like kind of up a hill, and it can unsettle the car. It should be an
Those
exciting race.
three corners, that like the first sector, let's call it, is
Yeah.
like primarily where the incidents happen. That or in like the third or fourth to last turn before you get to the front straight, you know?
Yep, it's two downhill right turns that go
Yes.
back towards
Yeah. Yeah.
but the first sector actually ends right before that dramatic
Okay. Okay.
turn.
Got
But yeah,
it.
that's where last year, I think it was last year, Max and Lando made contact,
Yeah.
took Lando out of the race. Max somehow made it back to the pit, put the tire. See, as I'm saying this, I'm like, there's so many like real life dramatic things that happen in F1
Right.
that it almost makes like the fictional portrayals seem kind of like, eh. Like if you would have written a movie that was the ending of the 2021 season with that race, I would have been like, that's unbelievable almost, right? Because of how it happened. But it actually did happen. Like the real life F1 stuff to me, I find like more dramatic
Well, I was going to say it's as dramatic
than
as
any
you
way
can
you could
even write.
fictionalize it.
Like, I
You
mean,
can't.
honestly, that was everybody's reaction in 2021. They were like, this is a Hollywood movie. Like, this is crazy.
Like, yeah, it would have been like, that seems a little convenient if it was a Hollywood movie, right? But like
Yeah.
that's how the sport is sometimes. And to me, like it just makes any attempts at fictionalizing it just seem kind of like
Yeah, I
I have a
think
hard time buying into.
Lewis being a major contributing producer for this film, I think he'd probably say like, yeah, let's not document that. It's already been documented, frankly, on YouTube forever.
Yeah,
So
but I wondered for a moment. I was like, "Oh, is he gonna have himself win this race and the other two?"
yeah, that would be incredible, wouldn't it?
That would
Just
have been
totally,
funny,
yeah,
which would have been funny. But he doesn't, and of course Lewis has made contact, even with his teammate, to take himself out of the race,
sure.
with Nico Rosberg, with
Yeah.
Jensen
That was at
Button,
Monza too, right? Wasn't it Monza that they did that?
China, I think.
Or was it China? Okay.
Shane, I don't know.
I just
My
remember I can see it now, like in the gravel. I think there's gravel, like the, or was it Spa? No.
no.
Anyway, it doesn't matter. Um,
Our memories are shot at this
yeah, I
point.
can't. Yeah. I've had coffee. I haven't had that much coffee.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm without my MCT oil this morning.
Yeah, there you go. There you go. So it's I, the movie in that regard, like it's kind of like fun to watch for the racing scenes. It's fun
Mhm.
to see like the look inside of the wind tunnels was
Yeah,
cool.
that was cool.
Their headquarters is the McLaren Technology
Yeah, I was
Center.
gonna say they
Like
definitely used McLaren.
yeah, it was cool to like see a lot of that stuff
Yeah.
that you don't normally get to see, you know.
Hmm.
So like that was those were the parts of the movie that I think I enjoyed more
Yeah.
than anything. I also really like that he in the beginning of the movie was like looking at the Baja 1000 thing, and then at the end, he references I got some more dragons to slay, and then he ends
Yeah.
the movie going
To
to the
Baja.
desert,
Yeah.
to the Baja Peninsula, to try and get in that race, which is awesome. I love the Baja 1000, and I would love it if they did some kind of movie to like put a spotlight on, hey, this is like a crazy thing that happens,
Yeah.
and you
Yeah.
should be
Or
aware of
or
it.
even just the documentary. I was
Yes, a doc.
again,
Yes.
even due to the algorithm, once again, I saw a little bit of an interview with Brad Pitt, and he was talking about the Isle of Man, the TT, the
Yeah.
motorcycle
Yeah.
race, which even
Which
like
is
Moto,
happening or
it's
happened.
like
It's
right, I don't know, it's either just before we're recording or maybe it's next weekend or something. I don't know,
yeah.
but it's MotoGP guys are like, hell no, I'm not doing that. Those
Yeah.
guys are nuts. And like people die every year. It's the most insane thing. So if you're listening to this and you don't know anything about the Isle of Man TT, just Google that or throw that into YouTube and get your mind blown.
Yeah, check that out and check out Baja 1000 stuff is also really
Yes.
cool.
Yep.
I actually did a test run of the Baja 1000
Oh, sick.
years and years ago. There's a watch brand called Graham sponsored one of the teams, and they offered to bring some journalists out.
Wow.
I think like literally only a couple of us took them up on it because it was like the entire length of, and we stayed in like these random towns, up down the from Tijuana area to La Paz down on
Or
the
like
southern end.
Ensenada or something. Yeah.
Yep, Ensenada we stayed in.
Yeah.
Totally amazing experience, and what a beautiful
Wow.
part of the world. But
What kind of car were you in?
we were in
Or
with
truck?
yeah, it was a truck. Man, I did a full write up of this for Hodinky. So if that's still live, I'll find it and link it
That
below.
would be so cool. I would love to read that.
Because you can see, it's intense. You're in there. It's the
Oh
whole time.
yeah.
You're going up and down
You're
off
bottoming out that
jumps.
suspension. Yeah.
I don't know if I could do it today. Back then I was early 30s or something, or maybe 30 at best. So it was my body could handle it. I don't know how I
Yeah.
would do now. But anyways, very cool race, and I like that he ended up there to do that. So now, if they did a part two, or if would it be Brad Pitt's character from the Thunder movie? Or Tom Cruise's character from the Thunder movie and Brad Pitt's character from this movie coming together to do the Baja 1000 together. And it
Oh,
could be
that would
like
be
a
funny.
buddy buddy odd couple type situation to them going
Right. Who would be
right.
the navigator?
Oh boy, that would be what they would always be fighting about, right?
I told you it was left back there.
Yeah. Yeah. And then they find themselves and friendship that they never expected and
Right.
yeah, all
And
that
then they
stuff.
share street tacos in
Yeah.
Cabo.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. All right, should we leave it there
Yeah, dude.
for
This
this
was
movie?
fun.
We can
This was
end it
fun.
on would you recommend this movie?
Absolutely. It's so much fun. I
Yeah.
mean, it look, I can sort of, it's almost like business and personal, right? Like it's like
Yeah.
the business part of me is like, oh geez, I roll, I roll. And then the personal part of me is like, oh my God. Like if you were to take your kids Like, what a fun movie,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
Like, I
yeah,
mean, it's PG-13, so your discretion, of course. Uh, highly, highly recommend the movie. Like,
yeah.
we're being very nitpicky and kind of jerks about it, but like,
I'll take that.
it's
That's on me.
it's great. Like, I mean, if you're looking for the errors, we will spot them and we will tell you, but as we
Yeah,
have.
yeah.
But
If
it's
you're
so much fun.
and if you're the
It's
type
so
of
much fun.
person that's like sat here listening to two guys like us drone on about it for an hour, you're
You're
probably the type
probably
of
in the same
person that
boat.
will like
Yeah.
that will
Yeah.
like the movie, and maybe you've already seen it. So yeah, I'm the same. I would recommend it. I would give it maybe a 6.5 or 7 out of 10 or something, kind of in that realm. Yeah, it's no Country for Old Men or something like that. Don't
Right.
expect to be drawn
Yeah,
into
it's
some
not a
great
drama.
story, but
Yeah.
it's a
Yeah.
fun movie to watch. And again, 100%. Yeah, if you got some kids,
So
it's
great.
well worth it for that. All right, we'll leave it at that.
Yeah.
We will have to catch up about the season. There's been a lot of drama happening in Formula One.
Hmm.
Is Max Verstappen going to get a race ban tomorrow? He's got more points that come off of his license after the race tomorrow, so then he'll be a little bit into the clear if he can behave himself
Oh
tomorrow
yeah, that's
during,
right.
during
That's
the
right.
race. So we got all these kinds of things that we can talk about, and as
The
the
George
season,
Russell comment, like
the George Russell, yes,
I have some points to play with or something
yeah,
like that.
exactly. He was being a little like when he braked that hard. I was like, George, you know exactly what you're doing, man.
Yeah.
So,
Cheeky.
yeah,
Cheeky.
very very cheeky as he would put it. So yeah, we'll have a lot more about the season kind of as it goes along. So keep an eye out for that.
Yeah. Thanks, Blake.
Uh,
This was fun.
yeah, thanks Wes, and thank you for listening. And until next time, take care.
Thanks, guys.